Good morning. Thank you for joining today's VOLTHA TST call on May 8th, 2018. We are recording the meeting so we can post it later to the VOLTHA playlist, so keep that in mind during discussions, presentations, or comments. And with that, I think we will go right into status updates today. And I had left off the review of recent defects on the agenda somehow, so I added that on. So that was not on the email I sent out yesterday, so apologies for that. For Sprint 1 or 2.0, let me go over to the VOLTHA board. And I think for a couple of the main areas that are in progress, I will just check with the leads for that work and see if there are issues that need to be brought up for discussion on the call today. So Chip, I do see you're on the bridge. So for Open OMCI, do you have any specific issues that are currently scoped in for Sprint 1 that need discussion with the group?
No, things are going pretty well right now. I'm actually picking up some bugs that have been out there in the OMCI for a long time. So I'll be doing a lot of reviews shortly.
Okay, great. And any questions from the group for Chip? Okay, then let me see if Shad is on. Shad, I see you're on as well. So for Open OLT adapter, do you have any items that need to be discussed with the group today?
No, Judy.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Great, thank you. And also any questions from the group for Shad on the Open OLT items that are in Sprint 1? Okay, then let me see if we've got, I don't see Sergio on. David, I see you on, so I'll
Yeah, Sergio's going to be about 30 minutes late. He said he had another conflict. He put one item, he said in Sprint 1, that he was responsible for.
Yes, so I see that in there. And so we do have that work on the VOLTHA Affinity routing kicked off as well. So I'll remind me, I'll try and circle back when he's on the bridge to see if there's anything that the community has for him for questions or vice versa.
All right.
Okay. All right. And then the remainder of, we do have a few defects that are in here as well. I'll plan to be going over those with that last item on the agenda as well, but we can look at the few that we've got in here right now as well. And so the first one was one, and so I see, is Jonah on? Oh, actually he is not on, so I can't get an update.
It's actually Luca's ticket. Luca opened this ticket. Is that all?
Right, but it was assigned to Jonah. Yeah, is Luca on? I don't see Luca either. Okay, so this one has already been assigned. I was going to check on status if this was on track for Sprint 1, but I'll have to do that offline. And then, well, but while we're here, let me see if there are any questions from the group on Bull 746. No errors thrown on ONOS if wrong OLT ID is input during add subscriber. So this is asking for the return of an error for this operation.
Right. I think right now the VOLTHA or ONOS, they are not a lot of the checking or error reporting, active reporting mechanism. So if you enter something wrong, they just as if it's been accepted, but there should be an error message. So their series of the ticket issued by Luca is similar to that expect. So
and are those covered in the filter?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So this is one of that batch.
And I think some of the fix should be fairly it's just someone just has to do it. And for example, if the DPID is not there, just build out the error or something like that, or deleting the wrong device or adding a wrong device, things like that. So it's just some of the error check mechanism and then reporting the status. potentially right now, I don't know what's the end result. If something error is just a CLI message, I think we would also talk about a REST API should receive the same error, right? So
But again, is it for this one in particular? Is it that clear what the right thing is to do? Can't I add a subscriber for a DPID that isn't yet in Onos?
no, I think that should be blocked.
So you can't pre-add a subscriber to Onos and do it. So now you've insisted that I do it in Volta first, and the device is added in Onos, and then I go to Onos and do an add subscriber.
I don't see there's any case where the subscriber will be added before the device had been planned or pre-provisioned, right? So potentially we can pre-provisioning. I think that's probably the most extent. And anybody from AT&T, you know, maybe Mike Geiser's on. But
I mean,
I think
AT&T's use case is that the device would be planned first before you add subscribers.
right.
That's AT&T's use case.
Yeah, that question is that everyone's use case? And if not,
I can't speak for everyone.
well, why not?
Let's do not be too creative in some. I mean, if I'm open for new ideas.
It seems to me that it's hard to know that, you know, when you're doing this and the DPID is invalid or not. I mean, yeah, you could do a check on if the thing exists, but that implies that you've added the OLT first. And I don't personally know if that's always going to be the use case for all the carriers. But I know by doing this, we are disallowing the ability to add the subscriber to Onos first and then bring up the device.
Okay, so I think we need to have some further discussion on this one. Sean?
Yeah. When you know, why do we spend the time on that discuss? I think it's just something very straightforward. So sorry, I got distracted. So David, what are you saying about? First of all, whether the DPID itself, right? The DPID. I thought the DPID is generated automatically, right? Because you got the cluster, the core number plus the MAC address.
The switch generates a DPID or hands over the DPID to Onos when it connects. The DPID, at least the bottom part of the DPID, is essentially the MAC address of the OLT.
The MAC, yes. So I would assume how many service provider will check the MAC address of the device first before they deploy it, right? So I think if we say if the DPID is something can be manipulated as the subscriber, I mean as the operator defined name, then I would say that probably make more sense. But if we just stick with the DPID today, which is generated only generated when the device is enabled, then I really don't see any subscriber can be flow before the device got installed.
Okay.
Do we have
that's fine. As I said, I'm kind of with you, Sean. Let's not debate it anymore. Let's just do it.
Right.
Okay.
And we have Bjorn on the call. So Bjorn, you're my de facto other service provider. Do you think you're going to flow subscriber before the device in?
No, I don't see.
Yeah.
So in general, I agree with you with your comments, Sean. So
yeah.
And Tom
no
Moore,
other.
I have a question for you. It looks like I have a request to make you presenter? Do you have something you wanted to share?
You asked me?
No,
Tom
Tom
Moore.
Moore.
Okay.
No, Julie, I think that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do
Okay.
that.
Just wanted
All
to
right,
double
thank
check
you.
if I saw it. No problem.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. And then I believe most of the remaining issues were related to, not all of them, but we have a number of issues related to device management for the edge core. So that is still an item that needs to be determined going forward on who is going to be working on that. So Sean, I think at this point it is probably time to pull together a side meeting for that. So I tried to work some things in the background this week, but I think we need to just set up a call. So any thoughts there from you?
In the meantime, the side meeting, we probably do need to include Kim on the call.
Oh, yes, yes. I'd be including Kim and EdgeCore, Sunny, and others who are interested in attending. We need to figure out a path forward. Okay, so let me see. And this one, I think this was one that Sunny had opened, so we can discuss this one later with Sunny as well for an update there. Any other questions on what we have in Sprint 1 at the moment for status updates? Okay, then the next item I want to talk about is just, I think last week we had all of the, at least for Sprint 1, the 2.0 epics and user stories entered. And then we still have the one open item, which is for EdgeCore OLT adapter enhancements, which is on hold due to dependencies on other scope items. But I think all of the others were closed out as completed for the entry last week. So that one, that was just the only status update there. And then we have a couple items still under discussion from the group. And so the first one, abstraction for FCAPS management, there is a presentation planned on this coming Thursday. So we do have that scheduled for some follow-up after there was a meeting about, I think it was a week ago, on the first presentation material. So Mike, is there anything else you want to add to that today?
Well, Thursday we'll start to talk about stuff like OLT, ONT, possibly pod management, and where we can do those things, and some ideas that we're having. So we'll try to get that presentation together and talk about the best places to do that kind of device management type of stuff, and possibly even pod management type of stuff. When we from an AT&T point of view, we're definitely starting to look at a pod deployment of everything, and so mostly ONOS controlled. So we'll talk about where we're kind of seeing things going, and the kind of interfaces that we can hopefully reuse that already exist for those things. And then Tom Moore is working on some alarms in PM, and I don't know about if that's coming up today. Oh, that's coming up today. Okay, yeah. So that'll be for later today.
I was just going to get a status update on that. We don't have anything currently on the schedule for it, so that's still in.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, well, yeah, I'll let Tom address alarms at PM. He should be bringing that soon. I don't know if that'll be Thursday as well or not.
I'm out of office on Thursday, and I want to target next Tuesday for alarms and PM. And I can actually send out, if I have something that I want to review, then because I know we're pushing it out, I want to send it out on both to discuss in advance, and for some review, so that I think it's of a nature that it can be shared before we present. and that could help move it along well, given that I won't be able to present on Thursday.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll put you on the agenda for next Tuesday, and we'll try to split the time between the Sprint 1 updates and the presentation. Since let's see, this is week 2 of our sprint, so next week's our last week on the development for Sprint 1. Okay. All right. Then,
Julie, before we move off,
yeah.
questions about a couple things there. There was mentioned a pod. I'm just curious for clarification. When the word pod is used, what is meant by this? If we could have a kind of brief, is that like a cord pod? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of working on the term peripheral pod, and in terms of what we would be doing in AT&T, in eComp, managing it more like a PNF. So managing the entire cord pod, more like a PNF, but still needing to be able to do some different things to the pod from the external point of view. So some of those things possibly, and maybe some of those things already even exist, and we just need to be pointed to them. We're still learning and everything, but we're looking more to in the 2018 timeframe integrate kind of more a small cord pod, and we're still working on the definition of the number of servers and the number of switches and the number of pieces that would go to support VOLTHA, but so still under definition. But yeah, the idea of a cord pod that would be a PNF into ONOS or ONAP eComp and having it managed that way.
The other question I wanted to bring up on the other discussion, not on the pod discussion, was about PMs and fault management. And I did email about this in the email list. I'm kind of looking for I guess a litmus test. I don't know if that's the right word, of what people are thinking around this in terms of VOLTHA as a source, event data source, or are they looking, or is the direction here that people are thinking VOLTHA as doing fault correlation, threshold crossing events, and all that stuff in VOLTHA?
Related to, well, I saw your thread, your post there on VOLTHA Discuss, and Tom can address as well. I see that as something that we need possibly at an ONOS layer, not all the way up into OSS, BSS above. I don't even know that it's all the way up into OSAM. I see something needing to happen at the ONOS layer above VOLTHA. I can agree with you that let's keep VOLTHA lean and mean, but I do think that there's processing that has to get done at the edge that probably would reside somewhere in ONOS is my thought. And if Tom has any other thoughts to preview what he's got coming up, he can comment there too.
Could I just a quick question on the same area, the SCAPS management? So has there any thought about the redfish work? I mean, how does that play into that, or it doesn't right now? Or?
I believe that is a device adapter function. It's and it's relevant there for how we manage the devices through adapters. If I understand correctly, the redfish, as it's implemented on an edge core VOL2 today, that's where its relevance is. But in terms of how we manage VOLTHA northbound, that's at a different layer than redfish, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, I guess it could be. Okay.
Well, it's part of what supports adapter functions. Redfish is. So adapters are on the southbound side of VOLTHA. We were discussing, and I don't know if you're asking the question about the discussion that we were just having about tying a northbound interface of VOLTHA through ONOS, which is of interest. We're specifically just to finish a comment, Mike asked for some comment there. We're looking at the ONOS Yang tools in ONOS as a place using tools that are in this community to determine how to model things through Yang for a northbound interface, northbound of actually Awesome or VOLTA from a controller for management functions. And the TST in January, that presentation was made there, and we're interested in how to tie that in with parts of the architecture, and this would be outside of and calling into VOLTA, not fundamentally part of VOLTA to adapt Yang models and whatever protocol we think we can use to wrap the Yang models. I'm being general there because we haven't made a proposal here, but that is a starting point that we're wanting to get some discussion about on that. Hopefully that makes sense. Mike, and does that Sean, that represents the discussion we had yesterday, I think. If you want to comment anymore.
No, I mean, I think that's good. I see definitely, I think it was David's point about letting VOLTA be light and not do a lot of stuff. I do think it needs to correlation or binning or some of those other things should likely be happening before it hits awesome. And so there is some manipulation application of action on the data that I think would happen in the ONOS layer, and then I think that ONOS would then be generating the possibly Kafka streams or Yang model interfaces above up into Awesome, where Awesome then would tie that for an AT&T case back into eComp or ONAP or whatever. And so I think keeping VOLTA light is good. But then I think that there's still application work that we need to happen somewhere before it hits Awesome. So that's kind of how I would see it.
Well, there's a Kafka bus within the VOLTA 2.0 architecture, and I don't have a proposal yet on this, but it could actually be subscribed from another layer. So if I'm understanding correctly, it might be possible with some VOLTA tools to do some of that. I don't know if that's the right or the preferred way to do it versus what you just said of doing.
Well, I think David's proposal that he put on VOLTA Discuss was more like VOLTA generates the events and someone else integrates the alarms or integrates the PM intervals or integrates the whatever, and VOLTA just puts events on the notification bus. Well, I don't think all of those events need to go up all the way to Awesome before something happens. I think that there would be a level, and I see it at ONOS, so that ONOS would subscribe to VOLTA's notifications, integrate the alarms, bin the PM or whatever, and then provide upstream to people above it more correlated data than would be the raw data that's down in VOLTA.
The only caveat I would add there is I'm not sure it's an ONOS, because I don't think ONOS is a fault management system or performance management system either. It's a controller. So I would say there is a third party, if you will.
Cord app, a app that is running underneath ONOS, and I may not have the right terminology or whatever.
So the direction,
but an app that's running on that compute space and is managed there somewhere. Whatever
so the
right
direction
terminology is.
I haven't put this down in writing. I apologize. We're bringing up the topic, so I'll jump ahead a little bit. But where I was going with Kafka bus and VOLTA in 2.0 is that it is a place where the VOLTA can put the alarms and PM onto that bus, and something external to Volta and possibly even external to ONOS can write adapters from it, but it would not be part of this project. And Fluent D is potentially and essentially a logging location may provide some caching for the Kafka functions, but I need some help understanding that. I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, but that would be keeping us at what's essentially in a 2.0 architecture already when you add the Kafka bus in, as far as something external can listen to, subscribe to, and we're not really adding fundamentally any architectural change beyond what we already know about 2.0 to accomplish that. We can discuss putting alarm severity outside, because that could be done outside. It doesn't have to be done inside Volta. That I agree with that. I don't know if that works well for everybody who may be consuming it, because it would put the alarm severity configuration in some layer outside of Volta. Could be done, right? No problem. But we have to think from AT&T if that's what we want to do. We haven't had a chance to discuss that yet. There may be other inputs. I don't think it's a major thing, but fundamentally, if it helps Volta, definitely want to ask the question of moving it out, keeping it out, like David suggested.
Yeah, I guess the only issue potentially with that would be anything high availability related, right? I mean, we may need to take action locally as opposed to export alarms and events for external processing. All right.
That could be would be a function of. I agree. So reacting to a fault within the infrastructure for high availability purposes definitely can and should be local. This is just to the alarms in the PM discussion that we'll have. We could have that discussion, and that would be considered a local control policy type action inside of Volta that would be based upon seeing an alarm. Our focus will be somewhat upon how to export the alarms and PMs from Volta, and some of the discussion that David brought up in Volta discussed about the role of Volta, essentially.
Right. Presumably from like the high availability perspective, I don't know if we've talked about this before. A lot the processes that are part of Volta, whether they're containers, however you want to call them, I at least in my own mind have been kind of assuming kind of the fast fail scenario, which means when an error happens, it's easier to crash the container and let HA deal with it. HA that's part of Kubernetes deal with it and restart the container to get back to a known good state faster, right? Rather than try to error correct. And the point being there is I'm not sure how much eventing for HA needs to be processed locally, other than what Kubernetes already does in terms of monitoring processes and containers. So I'm open for, if it's needed, it needs to be done internally. But my initial thoughts are that for HA, we shouldn't need most of that. Most of that's all the perform. If we want to kickstart a container because of a performance issue with it, that can and likely should go through the normal event processing up to a correlation engine, up to a policy engine to determine that, hey, because this is 80% utilized, I'm going to restart. That should still all be kind of controlled outside Volta, and Volta should be just a receiver of a command in that scenario. So I'm not against it when we need it. I'm just not convinced yet we do need it, that processing inside Volta for HA, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good to just look at the use cases, I think, and then we can evaluate that. Can I just go back to FCAPS management again? Sorry, but so the pod management. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I really just planned for this to be, talking about when the presentations were going to be. So one more question, and we probably need to move on with the agenda.
Well, just from a, I guess a scope. So pod management, there's basically, there's compute, there's switches. I mean, is the idea that the equipment management for the OLTs is kind of orthogonal to, the other management of the pod in general? That's going to be special.
Well, I mean, no. I mean, I think OLTs are managed as pieces, and ONTs, physical pieces, are managed. They have characteristics, they have serial numbers and inventory data and software releases and stuff like that. But then the pod has that same type of stuff as well, to some extent. So those, I mean, there's obviously physical pieces that are part of the Volt and the OLT, and then there's physical pieces that represent parts of the pod that are not covered in the pieces that are parts of the Volt. So I mean, for me, pod management and lifecycle management of the pod would be more around those pieces of the pod. How do I load a new ONO software version? How do I load a new VOLTHA software version? How do I load things onto the pod that need to be lifecycle managed as part of the pod that are not part of how do I load firmware onto image core? How do I load firmware onto an ONT or manage their inventory?
We probably got to going for Julie to get through her agenda.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and I do see that you joined. So for these topics, please feel free to utilize VOLTHA Discuss for both of these topics, for continued dialogue prior to the presentation, so we can make efficient use of our time there. And then I did see that Sergio joined, so I wanted to jump back to the Sprint 1 item. And I do see we have one item in progress. So I just wanted to come back here to see if there are any questions for Sergio from the community on the ongoing work for Sprint 1, or questions back from Sergio to the community.
Well, I certainly have no questions back.
Okay, then I think we can go ahead and move on. The next item on the agenda was looking at where we are with the sprint planning updates, and primarily a focus today is going to be on looking at resources and how that's impacting our schedule and some refinement there. So we do have some updates on these slides. We have some additional resources that we've started to slot in from the AT&T side to various groups, and so this is part of that reach out to the technical leads. And so for some of these, we don't have individuals assigned yet. So I wanted to check on the call to see how to get people plugged into the work. So Sergio, I see you on the call right now. I'm not sure who from Sienna is going to be leading who should be my kind of primary point of contact for.
That's Ken. So restructuring of VOLTHA core is Ken.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll reach out to him when he's back in the office. We do have one person on the AT&T side who would like to get plugged into that work if possible. So
sure.
I will have him, should I have him reach out to anyone else prior to when?
No, I think his best bet would be Ken.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. And then on the containerized adapters, that was also another one that's going to be led by Sienna. Do we know who the contact person for the technical lead would be for that?
Well, put Ken's name there for now. We're going to swap that out for another guy on the team. But for the time being, just have Ken there.
All right, thank you. And then this one, I think we're expecting the VOLTHA software component upgrade to be primarily documentation, most likely. But is there a person I should put down for that item?
Just leave it Sienna for now. I want to discuss with David and Ken and the rest of the team to see who wants to actually be point for that.
Okay, thank you.
And Sergio, feel free to contact us, and I mean Julie and I, if the task is not very clear. So
Okay. Yep.
Okay. And then on the technology profiles side, we did have a meeting yesterday and allocated a number of those user stories that were entered. And so that has been assigned to a number of folks. I've added their individual names down in this list. We're still looking for who will include for some of the items, but I've got company names down for those. And then OpenOMCI stack. At this point, we have a couple names from the AT&T side added here as well. And so Chip has been put in contact with those people for discussion. And then we do have resources we're looking at, and I have them as question marks right now because I'm not sure which area they're going to be working on, if it'll be the OpenOLT adapter or the Edge Core adapter, but I do have tentative assignment there for some additional resources. And then on the next page, we do have some more assignments from the AT&T side as well with individual names. But we still are waiting for requirements for a number of these, and so we don't have a technical team lead at this point. Once the requirements are done, then I believe we'll be able to get that assigned. So I did have a question also on log
That would be
management.
David. That one's David.
That's what I thought, but wanted to double check before I put a name down. So
Wait,
David, we
wait.
Hey, I heard your name, David. So
So did I. He didn't say David Bainbridge though, so let's be clear.
we do have one person on the AT&T side who is looking to get plugged into that work as well. So I know we're still in sprint 1 reviewing the draft material you have out there to help develop the requirements. And then after that is, I think, where the detailed work would begin on how that would be implemented. So I'm not sure at what point you want to bring him in for discussions, but if you need to put you in contact with him, please let me know. Okay, so with this, what I've done is I've gone to our sprint, kind of our rough chart we looked at last week with how many sprints we're expecting for things. Still don't have a good sense of how many it's going to take for the restructure of VOLTHA Core. So we did a ballpark guess of 3 last time. Still working on getting the number of contributors for there. And we're also expecting the containerized adapters would be following this, but not quite sure if there'd be some overlap. Technology profiles, we still don't have an estimate for the number of sprints. We're getting a better sense for the number of contributors we'll have working on it. This is where the main change in terms of number of sprints came in this time. So this is, well, if I can get it to highlight. Let's try it this way. Okay, so I put the equivalent of about 1.5 ads there because I think some work may get split across different items. So that brought us down from 10 plus what we were looking at for the OpenOMCI work to a range. I ballparked it there with the added resources down to 5 to 6. So Chip, does that look reasonable for kind of a first guess with the added resources?
Yeah, that looks good right now, and I think probably towards the end of sprint 2, we'll probably sit back and repoint.
Okay.
Once we know what we're doing.
All right. And I did not change anything on the contributors at this point, working on the OLT adapters, so waiting to find out where on the previous slide some of this is going to get slotted in. So on the next time that I show this, likely we'll have different numbers in here. And then again, I've added in some counts here for items that still are in the planning stages for this, for example. So on the last meeting, this was really our driver for what had been scoped out for estimated sprints thus far. The driver for the schedule is the OpenOMCI stack, so we've reduced that risk. Gets us more in line with a September type of release rather than end of year, which is what 10 development sprints put us at. But we still have risk because we don't have estimates for number of sprints for some other key items like the technology profiles. So once the folks who are sort of starting to think about those user stories, if we can start putting together a rough idea of what we think would be required with number of development sprints, then we can start to see if there are other factors here that are going to end up driving the schedule as well. But right now, with the added resources to OpenOMCI Stack, I believe that's going to get us into a better time frame for the estimated release date. So any questions from the group on the kind of planning we're at right now for this? Okay. Then the next item, which is the one I forgot to put on the agenda that I sent out, was looking at the recent defects that are open in JIRA. Okay, and so the first one I was going to jump back to was starting back at Vol 694. And this one has been under discussion. I know there's a Garrett review open and there's been dialogue back and forth with that. Do we have any issues that need to be discussed with the group on this item today? Let me see if Girish is on. I know he's had some discussion, I believe, for the review in Garrett.
Yes, we had a discussion. So I have a contention only with the Xpawn configuration being read from the adapter. Ideally, that should be replayed.
Okay, so we'll just keep tracking this one. It is currently in sprint 1. And so if we need to bring it up on a VOLTHA DST call later, that's fine as well. But right now, I think things are being addressed during the discussion on Garrett. So I think we're okay. Anyone else have comments on this ticket?
Sorry, Girish, can you elaborate that a little bit? Something about Xpawn?
Yes, so when the ONU is rebooted, the OLT adapter, the ASF OLT adapter is sending an event inter-adapter message to the Broadcom ONU adapter. And Nicola has changed in the Broadcom ONU adapter to read the Xpawn configurations and then reconfigure the ONU accordingly.
Okay.
Ideally, the adapter is not supposed to, pull the Xpawn configuration from the core. They should be replayed from the core when the device. That's the contention that I have. So if config is not being replayed, it needs to be debugged. But it's not the right way to read the Xpawn configuration from the core.
Okay, so potentially it's the flow didn't get reflow again. I think that's the bug. But the workaround, what Nick provided, actually go back to the core to retrieve the information from the adapter side. Is that what's the?
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be a workaround in the adapter. Ideally, we should be debugging on why the Xpawn didn't replay.
And okay. Do we have any path forward to debug why the flow didn't get reflowed?
Yes, I think the VOLTHA logs would definitely help there. We need to see what is really happening. I think the logs will give more clue. I mean, I can help out there. I mean, if there are logs available, I can help looking at the logs.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Should be pretty easy to reproduce it also, right? And generate new logs.
Yes, yeah. That should be very easy.
One guessing or suspicion I have is whether shouldn't, because is that the AO2, if I remember correctly, the AO2.1x actually went through and then got a response back. Is that the follow-up DHCP doesn't get resent out. So DHCP is using the data path, right? So so potentially is that flow didn't get reflow, but the radius actually is fine.
Okay.
One thing I just, I don't know whether the behavior we see here, because it's around a lot of time, I think some people don't use the AO2.1x, right? And so I don't know how easily this one can be replicated at any other place other than the AT&T location. So Girish, in Radisys, do you guys have pretty much the setup as you can replicate that just like the AT&T location?
Yes, we can.
Okay. In that case, okay. I'll do some follow-up on this one. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Girish.
All right. And then I'll go on to the next open DStack. It was added in. This one is one that was specific to the AdTrend ONU, and Chip has this one in progress. So he's actually, Chip, looks like I probably need to get this assigned to you. It shows in progress. We can do that afterwards. Oops. Where did I thought I had this. Oh yeah, one more page. That's what I was missing. All right. And then the next item was the one we talked about when we were going over Sprint 1 items. So I don't think we have any further discussion now. Jonna had joined at one point. I'm not sure if he's still on. I think he left again. Okay. So that one we did discuss at the start of the call. 749 is the next open issue. And this is disable an OLT and Volt apparently fails, even if it actually doesn't. And so this one, I think, is unassigned at this point. So Sean, was this one you had more discussion with Luca on these? And I think you're on mute, Sean.
Yes, we went through this, but I think this one probably we need to try to see whether we can replicate it. Let me see what we can. I guess I don't quite remember this one. Let me review this one.
Okay, so I will not add a comment yet.
What's the number? 740? 749?
49.
How do you like my new headset? Is it better?
It's better, yes.
Okay.
All right, and the next new one is an error an uncatched error returned when a user tries to disable the physical device twice. Okay, so this one looks fairly straightforward from the description. So you've already disabled the device and you disabled it again, and you get this error rather than just an indication that the device is already disabled. So again, this one is listed as a low priority and then not assigned, so it's currently not in Sprint 1. So Sean, we need to do some backlog scrub and try and target some of these new items as well.
Right. One thing when I was talking to the Luca and the core team over there, because they will be a core release. I think latter half of the June. Okay. So I think since with a lot of core integration right now, VOLTHA and ONOS for the VOLT project is part of the release composition now. So I really would like to have these fixed before the core 6.0 release. So this one is not target. I mean, it will be before 2.0. So I think these are all sort of deployment instability issues. So I do want to have these one worked out if we can to before the core 6.0 release.
Then I think what we need to do is look at which sprint is the best target for it, depending on
Sprint 2
resources are available.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then we've got about 3 minutes left. So let's try and go through these quickly. So error thrown if device is deleted using the wrong ID. So you disable the OLT using the wrong name and get, instead of an error, you get reporting that you have the wrong name. You have, again, a more cryptic response.
Yep. This is similar to the previous one.
Yep. And then the next one, delete an OLT. The ONU does not get deleted at the same time or as well. This one already has an assignee. So Shad has been assigned this. I'm not sure if he is still on.
No.
Yeah. So, hello, this is Shad. Yeah. Yeah, Luca's trying all sorts of things and he's assigning these bugs. So I don't know what these bugs are. So I need to take a look at them.
Okay. Okay. So we'll have to have some follow-up later. And it sounds like Sean has some follow-up on another one as well. All right. Thanks, Shad. And then 753 cannot delete an orphan ONU from the system. So if an orphan ONU remains, it cannot be deleted until VOLTHA is reinstalled. So it should be possible to do a cleanup. And then there's a listing of the received errors.
I think that's sort of like a combined with the previous one, right? Because you delete OLT, you create an orphan ONU, and in order to delete the orphan ONU, you have to restart VOLTHA. So that's
right.
Dramatic.
So it's related to the previous one. Okay, right now it's shown with a medium priority. All right. The next one, 757. This one is actually scoped into Sprint 1. This is related to the OpenOLT adapter, hard-coded DPID used for all logical devices. And so that one I think is targeted for inclusion in Sprint 1 right now.
Yeah, that's. I'll be working on that.
Okay, great. And this one is required. The fix is required so we can support multiple OLTs on the same VOLTHA. So that one is in progress, and then, or to do, but slated for Sprint 1. Next one is 775. Decode of VLAN tagging filter data is invalid. And Chip, this is one from you. Any comments for the group?
Yeah, I had that fixed. It was just the way they were doing the packet. I'm surprised that even the encoding works, but it was. Okay. I was able to fix it with a list field capability in the decoder, and that should be submitted for review within a day or so.
Okay, got it. All right, so we'll watch for that.
Yeah.
And then I'm out of time. Let me see how many more we have. We've got 778. Previous error doesn't return any error if user tries to provision OLT using wrong device adapter. And so this one, low priority and not assigned at this point. Any quick comments from the group? Okay, next item, 779. VOLTHA and OpenOLT do not install flow from NNI port to Uni port. It remains in pending add.
Right, and I think this is specific for the OpenOLT right now, right? So
yeah, I think this one is actually a bug in ONOS rather than VOLTHA.
Okay.
I was debugging this. I think this is from Luca, right? I was debugging this with him yesterday.
What release of ONOS is being affecting on this one? 13 or
110? No, 110.
110. I didn't see this last week, but as you said, that's the but that's the OpenOLT, right?
I think the bug is in ONOS, so I would assume that it affects other adapters as well, or could possibly affect other adapters as well.
But
so this was an ONOS 110. I thought we're going to ONOS 113, and does it still exist there?
No, it is fixed or worked around in 113.
So 113
So
was last week, right? So because I don't see this one, we actually had traffic running last week in Atlanta, but that's we're still using the edge core.
No, it's a kind of a configuration thing or a race condition on us. So it's not. It is possible to make the system work. It's just if you get unlucky, then it will not work.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the solution is to move to 113, or a solution is to move forward to 113. And I have a task for that in the sprint to move the ONOS apps forward to 113.
Okay. Okay. So then we may need to link this one to that issue, and we can look at that afterwards. Okay. So 780 OpenOLT ONU remains in discovered state. And cause appears to be an exception. And this one is a medium priority, and this is opened by Shad. Any quick questions for Shad on this defect? All right, and then the last new defect was Bolt 788, PPTP Ethernet uni field size for max frame size is too small. And it should be 2 octets, but currently is defined as a single octet. So that one's fairly clear there. Any last minute questions? I know we're a little bit over today. All right, thank you everyone. So we do have a presentation lined up for this coming Thursday, so in a couple of days, and then another presentation lined up for next Tuesday. So we'll be splitting the time on the Tuesday call between the Sprint 1 updates and then the presentation from Tom Moore. All right, I think that's it for today, so I'll go ahead and stop recording. Thank you.